was watching the debate between the theist Trent Horn and the atheist Alex O'Connor. It was a very good and cordial debate, and Trent Horn is amongst the best apologist debaters I've seen. Alex is also brilliant and especially effective in more informal debates that resemble discussions more than debate. However, Trent in his opening statement provided a variety of questions whose answers he argued demonstrated theism. Unfortunately, in my view, many of these arguments weren't adequately answered by Alex. This is understandable, given that while Alex is brilliant, he doesn't have a training in formal technical debate involving long back-to-back speeches. So I decided to give the rebuttal speech that I think is optimal, that I would have given if I were Alex in that situation and had a bunch of time to prepare and gave a better speech than I would have actually given if I were in the debate. So I present to you the rebuttal that I think Alex should have given. The first question that Trent asks is, does the universe have a cause? He argues that everything has to have a cause based on the principle of sufficient reason, which states that everything has an explanation for its existence. He argues that abandoning the principle of sufficient reason would result in absurdity and violate all of science because it would allow hand-waving away phenomenon by saying that they just are and have no explanation. However, in my view, the principle of sufficient reason is not justified. It does not throw science into disarray to abandon it. We can adopt the principle of nearly sufficient reason, where the principle of sufficient reason is true except in a world where there is nothing. And in that case, the principle of sufficient reason can be violated. We've never observed nothing, and we can't make absolute claims about the nature of sufficient reason. The rules that apply in the universe don't justify meta-level claims that bind things outside of the universe. Everything in the universe is in the same galaxy as at least one star, but that does not mean that the cause of the universe is in the same galaxy as at least one star. The most plausible explanation for why there's something instead of nothing seems to be something along the lines of that's just the way that it was, rather than some deeper metaphysical explanation. Second, Trent asks if the universe explains its own existence and concludes that it doesn't, which I agree with. Third, Trent asks if the cause of the universe is changeable, and concludes that it's not, for two reasons. The first reason is that change happens when things that are potential become actualized, and yet the first thing must be pure actuality. It must be pure change in order to cause the universe. However, Trent has not proven why the first thing must be pure actuality. It doesn't need to be unable to change to create the universe. It doesn't need to be pure actuality. It just needs sufficient actuality to create a universe. Second, Trent says that change is an event, yet the first event can't be subject to an event because it became before the event of change. However, the event of change occurs after the beginning of the first cause, which means it could change. To use an analogy, a baby could be born before there were computers, but that doesn't mean that they'll never be able to use computers. The first thing could have existed before there was change, but that does not mean that it will never be able to change. Fourth, Trent asks if it's timeless and concludes that it must be timeless because change occurs in time, and as he claimed before, it cannot change. There are two problems with this argument. First, it relies on the idea that the first thing cannot change, which I think I've thoroughly debunked in the last argument. But second, change does not have to occur in time. Michael Esfeld explains in 2007 that physics is increasingly proving that time does not exist in any objective sense. It's merely a consequence of human perception. This would mean that change does not require time. Robert Kuhn further finds that time seems to not have always existed and have been brought into existence by earlier changes, which would mean that change doesn't require time, and in fact time was not eternal but began to exist as a result of changes. Fifth, Trent asks if it's material and concludes that it must be immaterial for two reasons. First, he says matter is always changing, and yet this is not a necessary property of physical things. It's just a product of the way matter works right now. Also, this relies on the first thing being unchangeable, which I do not think that he has justified. Second, he says that if it's timeless, it must be immaterial because to be in space is to be in time. Yet the theory that says that time is an illusion proves that being in space does not require being in time. Zimmerman finds in 2005 that philosophers who study the metaphysics of time generally agree that time is not an objective necessary phenomenon. And anyways, this relies on winning that God exists outside of time or that the creator exists outside of time, which has not been justified. Sixth, Trent says that the cause cannot be limited because it's pure actuality, and yet there's no reason provided why it must be pure actuality, or why being pure actuality means it cannot be limited. Things can cause other things also being limited. My parents cause me, but that does not mean that they are omnipotent and unlimited. Seventh, Trent says that the cause of the universe must be necessary, because if it were contingent, it would need an explanation for its existence. Trent argues that all things are either necessary or contingent. Necessary things include mathematics, logic, and other things that exist by necessity, while contingent things are caused by something external, such as a chair, which is contingent on the maker of the chair. Trent argues that contingent things cannot explain the universe because there is no explanation of why those things exist instead of not existing. However, any explanation for the universe won't have a sufficient reason, including the God explanation. We could certainly imagine a hypothetical universe without God, such as a universe of random points bouncing around that don't have a God. That proves that God is not necessary, because necessary things must exist in every universe. 1 + 1 would still equal 2 in the universe of points bouncing around because it's necessary. And yet God can't be necessary because it's possible to imagine a universe that does not have God. Eighth, Trent says that it must be personal and concrete, and he provides 5 reasons. First, he says that things are either concrete or abstract. Abstract things include things like numbers, logic, and mathematics, because they aren't physical. However, abstract things can't explain physical phenomenon, but he claims he already proved that it cannot be physical. Therefore, it must be abstract, but also able to influence the real world. The only abstract thing that can change physical things, according to him, is a mind. However, when Trent makes this claim, he is wrong. The laws of physics are abstract, yet affect physical things. Furthermore, even if we've never seen any abstract things that affect physical phenomenon, that would not mean that there could not be any non-physical things that affect physical phenomenon. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. This also relies on Trent proving that it's not physical, which I don't think he has justified. Second, Trent says that all things are either explained scientifically or in terms of agents. So if I'm describing why a pot is boiling, I'll either say because I wanted tea or give the scientific explanation. However, because there can't be a scientific explanation for an uncaused cause, it must be a personal explanation. This argument seems to have a variety of flaws. Number one, it doesn't justify why there can't be a scientific explanation for the first thing, or why the first thing can't just be the way that it is. There's no reason why we are entitled to an explanation for why things are the way that they are. Second, this is just about the way that humans linguistically describe causes and effects, yet doesn't establish any basic metaphysical reason why that's the only thing that can be, why that's the only way that things can be described. The explanation can be that that's just the way it is. There's no deeper explanation. And in fact, that is the explanation that we use for certain things. When asked why an event happened to us and why we got unlucky, the explanation sometimes is that's just the way it is, which disproves his claim that all explanations are either personal or scientific. Trent's third explanation for why it must be personal is that only a mind explains abstract objects such as logic, math, etc. However, there's no reason why only a mind can explain this. It seems like they just inherently exist independent of a mind. 1 + 1 would equal 2 even if nobody had thought about the problem of 1 + 1, and even if nobody was around to see 1 + 1 equaling 2. Fourth, he says that if our universe has no necessary cause, then it's a miracle, and the existence of miracles should serve as an argument in favor of God. However, the existence of God is equally miraculous, given that he is not necessary and does not have an adequate cause. Fifth, he says that morality requires an agent, because morality only applies to agents. However, Trent has neither proved why objective morality exists, nor proven why morality only applies to agents. Tornadoes are not agents, and yet tornadoes that displace tens of thousands of people are still morally bad. My view of morality is that morality stems from the inherent goodness of well-being and inherent badness of suffering. While there can't be well-being or suffering without agents, that merely proves that morality is a fact about the brain states of agents rather than an agent-independent fact. However, that does not prove that only an agent could have established it. Radioactivity only makes sense in the context of existing radioactive things, yet that does not prove that the creator of the universe had to be radioactive. Furthermore, this argument is subject to the dilemma called Euthyphro's dilemma. Are good things good because God decrees it, or does God decree it because it's good? If the first is true, then God could decree anything and have it be automatically good. God could decree that murdering babies is good, and that would have to be moral. If morality is just whatever God says it is. However, if God says that things are good because they are good in some external sense, that then proves the existence of a good external to God that does not require God. The ninth question he asks is whether the original cause is good, and he concludes that it is, because it's unlimited, so it necessarily meets its purpose. Meeting one's purpose is the nature of goodness, he argues. We say that a car is good if it meets its purpose of providing transportation. However, this argument is wrong. Meeting one's purpose does not make something morally good. For example, if you set up a slave ship to collect slaves, even if it meets its purpose of collecting slaves, that doesn't make it moral. Trent says that it is good because it provides for objective morality and claims that objective morality exists, and his justification for it is it really seems like it exists. However, seeming like it exists does not mean that it actually exists. Illusions seem like they exist, but they don't actually exist. There is a clear biological reason why morality would seem to exist, even if it doesn't. Then Trent says that atheism cannot explain objective morality, yet his justification is not sound. He says that under atheism we have no free will, so immoral acts are no more evil than a tree growing a branch. However, our brains make decisions, and we can still make rules to deter our brains from making bad decisions. Furthermore, this doesn't refute the view of morality that I adhere to of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism states that well-being is good and should be maximized. Even if we don't have free will, states of the world are still better than other states of the world if they have more well-being than the other state of the world. The lack of free will just refutes objective blameworthiness, but does not refute a form of morality that is about maximizing well-being, rather than blaming people. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the problem of free will is a greater problem for the theist than for the atheists. Theists can't affirm free will because they claim God knows everything that will happen in the history of the universe. And furthermore, science is increasingly proving that free will cannot exist. All of our decisions are the product of brain waves that are detectable before we know we formed the thought. Brain scans can know what humans are about to think before we know what we're going to think. Therefore, if all our thoughts are the result of brainwaves that we don't know about and that we don't decide, then we don't have free will to do anything other than mindlessly follow the electrical brainwaves. The non-existence of free will is not a challenge for atheist morality, because atheist morality, at least my morality, says we just maximize well-being, but it is for theist morality, because it would make damnation immoral. If we don't have ultimate choice over any of our actions, how is it moral to punish people eternally for actions that they didn't choose? If trees were able to suffer, it would still be good to help out trees, avoid suffering, but it would not be justified to eternally torture trees simply because they grew the wrong kind of branches. We finally made it through the very long opening statement of Trent, and given the large number of arguments made, it's understandable why Alex struggled to respond to them all. For those who would like to watch the debate, which I highly recommend, the link is in the description to the debate, as well as all of the sources that I cite. Importantly, Trent's argument for God is conjunctive. For it to be correct, all 9 of his premises have to be correct. If any of the premises are false, then his conception of God is false, because all of his premises are necessary for a God to exist. Ultimately, despite his persuasive opening statement, many of his arguments seem very refutable. Unfortunately, I think all too often atheist debaters don't make the best arguments in live debates against theists. Note, I'm not talking about Alex here. I think he's generally a very good debater. In this debate, he just had trouble keeping up with the ferocious onslaught of arguments. If you want to see Alex debating with Hitchens-esque levels of skill and wit, watch his debate with Jonathan Mcclatchie, which will also be in the description. This trend of atheists not adequately answering theists in formal debate can be seen through people like William Lane Craig winning handily nearly all of his debates with atheists. So if you want to help platform atheists who are willing to debate the nitty-gritty of precise theistic arguments, share this video. Help me gain prominence so I can debate theists like Trent Horn and Frank Turek. And most of all, thanks for watching.